Hello, and welcome to Leadership Trail Mix. No, there's nothing wrong with your phone. You're still listening to Leadership Trail Mix, and I'm still Miguel Oliveira. The reason for this opening that maybe you recognized, I hope you did, is that we'll be talking about Alexander Hamilton today. I'm a big fan. I don't know if I'm a big fan of Hamilton, actually, but I'm a big fan of the musical. There is rarely a week that I don't listen to the whole soundtrack. I've watched it live twice. I've watched videos of it so many times. I'm a big fan. And we'll be talking about Hamilton with Mariana Ortega, someone that I got introduced to by a dear friend, Olivia Sanchez. And Mariana is the founder of Cultural Compass Coaching and Consulting. And her practice is focused on relationship building, creativity, and human-centered leadership that enables clients to form dynamic solutions. Welcome to Leadership Trail Mix, Mariana.
Thank you so much for having me on, Miguel. It's great to see you again.
Nice. Let's start from the very beginning. Can you please explain to those listening to us why we're talking about Hamilton today? And how does that connect to the work you do?
Sure. So I thought that this would be a perfect time to not only talk about the musical Hamilton, because I was a theater kid and I'm a big Broadway nerd as an adult. And Hamilton is definitely one of my favorite musicals of the past 10 years. But it is celebrating its 10th anniversary on Broadway this summer. And I think most people see now that it's a cultural touchstone with a score that's now part of the canon of classic American musicals. But for me, it also hit different because it tells the story of a first-generation professional. And I identify strongly as a first-generation professional. Neither of my parents graduated high school. I was the first in my family to graduate college and pursue a white-collar career. So now, as a leadership coach and founder of my own boutique coaching firm, Cultural Compass, I work with first-generation professionals and 21st century leaders to help them navigate complex career environments.
That's beautiful, Marianne. I love how you're able to find the connection to your personal story there. And I just can't wait for everything we learned from you in this conversation today. So yes, folks, we're going to learn about Hamilton a lot. But don't worry, I don't think there are any spoilers that will ruin the show for you in case you haven't seen it yet. So please stick with us. This is a series of episodes, and this is the first one. And we're going to start talking about the beginning of the show. So Ron Chernow, author of the biography Lin-Manuel Miranda based Hamilton On, has said that the opening number summarizes the first 40 pages of his book in 4 minutes. What do we learn about Alexander Hamilton's first-gen origin story as the show begins, Marianne?
Sure. So I think the first 3 songs of the score give a lot of insight into Hamilton's first-gen origin story. And there are several themes that are revisited throughout the balance of the musical. But those first lines in Song 1, which is the title song, Alexander Hamilton, those first lines say, "How does a bastard orphan, son of a whore, and a Scotsman, dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean by Providence, impoverished in squalor, grow up to be a hero and a scholar?"
Wow.
So right there, we are introduced to the reality that, Alexander Hamilton was a first gen. So there's 2 ways that we use that phrase first gen in our world. First gen college student is pretty self-explanatory. You're the first in your family to attend and graduate from a 4-year higher learning institution. And there's also first generation professionals, which, as I said, it's the first person in the family that is the first to graduate college and successfully transition into a white-collar career. So first-gen pros usually also are first-gen college students, but necessarily interchangeable. And I think that there's an opportunity through the musical of Hamilton to kind of disrupt what some of those perceptions of first-gens might be, specifically who qualifies as first-gen.
Wow, that's powerful. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what qualifies a first gen?
Sure. So I have a YouTube channel where I unpack some of these themes, but one of the myths around first generation professionals is that the term really only can apply if you're someone with like an intersectional identity, immigrant or a person of color. Those are the only people who can really be considered first gen professionals. And I roundly reject that. Um, while cultural or ethnic background certainly does and can play into it, a significant defining factor for first gen professionals is a socioeconomic class. So, a white first generation professional from a low income background, which by the way, Alexander Hamilton was,
Mm-hmm.
runs into many of the same challenges with unspoken expectations in the professional world as a first gen professional of color who's also from a low income background. So, looking at how this identity applied to Alexander Hamilton, I think there's kind of a separate but just as powerful myth that he was always wealthy and he was already an established professional when he arrived in the colonies. And if you've seen the show, um, you know that's false. It couldn't be further from the truth. But, when you really start to unpack it, you see just how many parallels there are. His father's lineage was Scottish nobility, but nobility doesn't always equal wealth. As a matter of fact, his father was a fourth son of a minor lord. So by the time he was grown, there was nothing left to disperse. There was no wealth left to inherit.
Mm.
So that's what prompted him to go from Europe to Nevis in the Caribbean, and he became a merchant. That's where he met Hamilton's mother, who was the daughter of a planter herself and a Nevis commoner. So there was already humble beginnings from the start. And in addition to that, he was born out of wedlock. Hamilton was born out of wedlock. He was orphaned by the time he was 10. His mother had died and his father split. And although his mother had homeschooled him very well, he had no money.
Hmm.
So there was an upside to experiencing that much trauma in his early life. It instilled him with grit. And grit is a feature of first generation professionals, which, we'll discuss more in a little while. But the point is that he was orphaned and homeless, and he started working while he was being bounced around between homes until finally he was taken in by a wealthy merchant in St. Croix who saw his talent and became a mentor. So when he left for the colonies, it was because prominent community members who became very impressed with his work ethic and tenacity and intelligence, they actually collaborated to fund his trip to the mainland. And one of them went so far as to write him a recommendation for Princeton, which, as we know, is where he ended up first learning of his future nemesis, Aaron Burr.
Oh, wow. The amount of parallels, Mariana, that you've shared with us so far is just unbelievable. It's funny because you're talking about this guy that lived like centuries ago, and it could very well be the story of someone that was born yesterday. That's so fascinating. It's fascinating to see how much we evolved, but how much we also didn't, right? You mentioned grit there, and I love the book Grit. I've gifted it to so many people. Do you mind double clicking on the grit aspect of those who are first gen?
So I'm not saying that, trauma is necessarily a feature of the first gen experience, but in Hamilton's case, it was something that helped him to develop that grit. And I think it lives in tandem with this intense drive to overcome adversity.
Yeah.
So when you're first gen, you're typically born into less favorable socioeconomic circumstances, not necessarily impoverished, but like for myself, I came from a working class background.
Mm.
As I mentioned, neither of my parents graduated high school. They worked kind of different jobs throughout my childhood. My father was everything from a janitor to like a school hall monitor. My mother was a school aide, and she did some like off the books bookkeeping work. She also, did some babysitting on the side. Like there was not any immediate model of what it looked like to have a professional career in my world. And that's the case for millions of kids and teens and young adults across the country, so that when they find themselves in these environments that traditionally have been occupied by the elite, there is this grit and this intensity that we tend to summon that, enables us to use our extreme resourcefulness and establish our work ethic, because we already understand that we're going to have to double time it and work 3 times as hard to get to the same place as someone who maybe, had the the memo, going, so to speak.
Mariana, I love where this conversation is going. But I love the idea of grit, but I also love how you say and how you demystify what a first gen is. And the fact that so many times there are more things that make us equal than different, but we tend to really look at the exterior and think that all the answers are there. And sometimes our lived experiences just kind of have the power of bringing us together and see that commonality. So thank you for saying those things. And what is the first call to action that you would leave for the leaders listening to us today?
I would say, first and foremost, if you're a leader who oversees people, you probably have first gens on your team. So I would say be curious to learn about their stories and the challenges they experience. Taking an inclusive approach not only helps build deeper trust and a sense of belonging, but it primes them to unleash the significant attributes that first gen professionals come preloaded with, such as resilience and practical problem solving. So that would be my first takeaway for leaders today.
That's amazing, Mariana. Thank you so much. I can't wait for the next conversation. So, folks, stay with us. In 2 weeks, you're going to hear from Mariana again. And if you're just kind of binge listening to it, just go to the next episode. Thank you for listening. Take care and talk soon.